once again for joining us on this incredible journey of Getting to the Top podcast. This podcast is about transformational leadership, where we interview transformational leaders about their leadership journey. Our hope is in that doing so, we inspire other new and diverse leaders to pursue leadership, enhance leadership from those that are already on the path, and finally, and hopefully, change the world, maximizing our potential as human beings for the benefit of all of us. Today, I have the exceptional honor of introducing Jean Oelwang. She is the president and founding CEO of Virgin Unite. She's a B-team leader. She's the co-founder of Plus Wonder. She sits on the advisory council of the elders, as well as a number of other boards, including Virgin Unite, RMI, and of course, the Caribbean Climate-Smart Accelerator. And she has written a phenomenal book called Partnering, Forge the Deep Connections That Make Great Things Happen. But first, we're going to talk to Jean about her and about her journey and how she came into being. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Raquel. I'm so excited to be here. And I actually feel like I should be interviewing you because you're one of the most transformational leaders I've ever worked with and met. So I'm going to have to stop myself from that tendency.
No, and I'll tell you, Jean is so kind and I would say like fiercely kind and so incredible. And so, I mean, I'm honored on a number of different levels to be interviewing her today. And we have like a big love in with each other. So tell us, Jean, tell us about your upbringing. You know, I think when people see extraordinary leaders like you, they wonder, how did it start? Was it something, you know, amazing in your household, or what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, I mean, I was so fortunate to have two just extraordinary parents, and they both lived a life of service. And I remember when my father was very ill and he was rushed into the emergency room, and we thought we were going to lose him. And he came back, and he's like, I have to figure out how I can help more people in the next 100 years of my life. And this is when he was in his 90s. And then he started talking to me about how he felt bad that he never did more for the world. And we got in this conversation, and I reminded him that when we were looking at his old boxes, we found this beautiful book. He was a manager. My parents came from nothing. And my dad worked his way up in Sears and Roebuck from the store floor. And he was a store manager. And he had this beautiful book that all his employees wrote. And in the beginning, it said, a retail store is nothing more than bricks and mortars until people breathe life into it. Thank you, Bob, for breathing life into the story. And then page after page, it was about, thank you, Bob, for forgiving me when I stole something from the store. Thank you, Bob, for helping me get through my addiction. And it was just this beautiful moment of seeing the difference my dad made in individuals' lives. And his role in life was to lift people and bring people joy. So I was super lucky to have two extraordinary parents.
And about your mom?
My mom was just a deeply kind human being. And again, living in a life of service, of doing anything she could to help people and lift people. And I think she embedded that as a responsibility with us when we were younger, and not just to be thinking about our family or us as individuals, but to think about the collective community and what we could be doing to lift up. And so she worked tirelessly volunteering. She was a nurse at a young age. And so I think she always had that in her heart. And then she carried that on throughout life. And just, I think the other extraordinary thing with my parents is they were just a great partnership. And, you know, my dad sadly passed away a couple of years ago, and in the hospital, the priest came in and celebrated their 67th wedding anniversary together, and did a little marriage before my dad passed away the next day. But they were inseparable. You know, they were two people who were just a great partnership together.
And I think I will resist the urge to start talking about the book immediately, because I think it is so important about these partnerships that make amazing things happen. So, and you had how many siblings?
So I have two sisters and a brother right now. And again, I think we were all raised with my parents. They came from nothing, so they never kind of got stuck in a world of comfort. They always were hardworking and working in service of others. And I think all four of us have been raised with that kind of mentality.
And so tell us about, in school, what did you think you were going to become?
Wow. You know, When I was really young, I thought I was going to become a veterinarian. I just have this deep affinity and love for the natural world. So I was obsessed with it, all living things. And then I think I more followed into my father's footsteps into the business world. And that kind of took me on that journey. Mm-hmm. And I think I never probably had such a deeply defined path. I was kind of always open to what the next adventure was for me, which I think served me well, because I think I then took a lot of disruptive detours in my life that have helped shape me and who I am today.
So tell me about some of those disruptive detours.
Yeah, so I started my career with a company called GT Telecommunications Company in America. And I'll never forget, my first deeply well-intentioned boss gave me 2 books as a female leader. The first one was The Art of War, on how I would survive in corporate warfare of America. And then the second one was, just in case I didn't make it, The Joy of Cooking. That kind of set me on this tone of, I am going to prove that I can be successful without having to use weapons of war or having to learn how to cook. And so that kind of set me on this journey. And then I think, Raquel, one day I woke up and I was like, wow, I've lost who I am and what's meaningful to me. So I took these disruptive pivots, and one of them was, the first one was working in a shelter for homeless teenagers and for refugees in Center City, Chicago. And I think there I learned, my God, how screwed up are we as humanity that you have 12-year-olds living on the street. And it changed me forever. I think I could never go back after that. And then I went back into telecommunications, but I took a pivot where I went and worked internationally. So in countries like Colombia, Bulgaria, South Africa. And that was a really important pivot, because I saw the power of business and how business can create change and create jobs. And in South Africa, we launched one of the first prepaid services. So you can tell how old I am. But I remember we made our annual target literally within a month. And so we went into the townships, and people had taken these phones and created briefcase phones, selling phones out of their homes. It was just this extraordinary entrepreneurial spirit that was lifting the community. And then I kind of pivoted back into not-for-profit and went into the national parks and wildlife in Australia. And I think there I realized just how broken the relationships were between the government, not-for-profit, and business sector, and how slow things were to move to drive change. And then probably the last disruptive pivot is I went to work for Virgin Mobile in Australia and helped set it up. And it was there that I overheard Richard in the car wanting to do something more on the impact side. And so I pulled together a plan, sent it to him. And I'll never forget standing in my house, talking to him on the phone in Australia. And he said, let's do this. And I put down the phone, did a little dance. And then in a few years, I was off to help him set up Virgin Unite.
And this is Richard Branson, just to be clear. She heard Richard on the phone. That's amazing. And it's been such an amazing journey. So what has it been like, just starting this incredible foundation and taking it to where it is today, where it's had just enormous impact? I mean, there isn't a corner of the earth that this organization hasn't touched. And seeing all of the work that he's doing in Ukraine, I know about firsthand all of the stuff that Virgin Unite is supporting in the Caribbean. And it's so, what has that been like for you? Just seeing this thing grow?
I think, I think it's been the greatest gift of my life to have the ability to work with extraordinary people. And that's the thing that I think I love most about Virgin Unite, is working with people like you and with so many other extraordinary leaders who have created it. And Unite has been all about collaboration from day one. It's obviously in the name. And I think we realized right from the beginning that there was no way that we were ever going to have all the answers, and that the beauty and the way that we were going to scale change and impact in the world was by building these collaborations, these partnerships, and really helping lift other people's work. So almost almost like clearing the runways for others to really drive that change in the world. So we tend to be like a spark and a catalyst and create things, incubate them, and then let them be free to really do the work that they need to, as you're doing with the Caribbean Accelerator, as the elders are doing, as the B team's doing. And that's the stuff that really lights my heart on fire when you see something starting to fly and drive impact in the world. And, you know, Richard and the family, the Branson family, just are so deeply committed to this work. And we've got a great little, we're almost like a little entrepreneurial engine that really tackles unacceptable issues and systems for good and thinks about not just the symptoms, but how do we get to the root causes? How do we make sure that we're not just band-aiding something, but we're actually changing the system? And that's the stuff that gets me really excited, is about bringing together these collective leaders to really change the systems.
So what has been, let's see, you know, I can't even think that you would be able to sort of point out the thing that you are most proud of, or the thing that stands out in your memory most in your history with Virgin Unite, or what has been one of the most memorable times at Virgin Unite?
Yeah, that's a super difficult question, because I'm probably not going to answer with just one thing. I mean, one of the things that I have been most proud of was just seeing the elders start and getting the opportunity to work with the incredible Nelson Mandela and Graça Machel, and then Archbishop Tutu, to bring that to life. And I think, you know, Raquel, when we were working on it in the early days, we thought that the elders would give maybe like a day of their time or 2 days a year. But I think one of the most beautiful, extraordinary things is seeing the friendships that they formed, whether that's President Carter, Mary Robinson, Kofi Annan, these great leaders who came together collectively to work on behalf of humanity on peace and human rights. And those friendships have allowed them to drive exponentially more change than they could have on their own. And we've seen that with the B team. We've seen it with you're doing on the accelerator, you know, that bringing together and collaboration. So I think that's one of the things that excites me the most. But I think the other thing that I love about Unite is we're not just about big ideas or systemic change. We're also about individuals. And some of my most meaningful moments have been working with people like Anthony Ray Hinton, who was, you know, in prison for a crime he didn't commit for 30 years of his life on death row in a 5-by-8 foot cell. And he came out the other side of that as an extraordinary leader fighting to end the death penalty. And for me, it's like the greatest privilege and honor of my life to call him a friend and to figure out how we can help lift his work. And it's those kind of people that really light my soul on fire, and are the people that for me are the most meaningful that I have the chance to work with.
And I mean, I remember, you know, when we talk about the death penalty and just how inhumane it is, how passionate you get, and, you know, you will go and protest physically yourself because it's just about not accepting the unacceptable and realizing that we are better than this. And this, in this day and age, with all that we know, this just shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I mean, it just simply is extraordinary that we still have the death penalty in America, and that we're killing innocent people. There's no reason, no positives for the death penalty. And I feel like it just shows the corruptness of our moral values right now, is that we still kill, in the state that I'm sitting in right now, in Utah, we still have the firing squad. And it's just extraordinary to me that we even have to talk about this. It just should be something, it's barbaric, and it should have been ended a long time ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. But, you know, you mentioned the formation of the elders. And I remember, I think that's one of my favorite stories in the book. And I also remember just when I think about how you lead, and I'll ask you about what kind of leader you think you are. But I remember when I had a particularly, a presentation that didn't quite go to plan, and how you took me aside and you comforted me and you told me this story about President Carter. And it just, you know, it made me realize, listen, it happens to the absolute best of us, and your humanity and your how gentle you are as a leader, as well as making sure that everybody's accountable, which is sort of like a fierce kindness in your leadership, which I really appreciate. But what was you can't pick a favorite story. That's impossible in the book. But what was it like for you? And I want to shift to talk about the book now. The book, after reading it, immediately rocketed to one of my top 10 favorite books because of the stories and just how I could feel it. I could feel like I was sitting there, and you could see how, like, I felt like lights went off for me about these partnerships and how, as it says in the book, 1+1 = millions, how those partnerships made so much more than any of those individuals would have been able to do on their own. So tell me about the inspiration for this book. What was your light bulb moment when you decided I have to write this?
Yeah, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. I think just to follow on from your comment about, I think it's the mistakes in our lives that make us who we are and build us stronger. And like, I remember, Raquel, and the presentation you gave was actually really good. And you just, when we had that conversation, the next one you gave was brilliant and off the charts. And I think that's the sign of a strong leader, when they take something and then they build into something even better and stronger. And you do that again and again and again. And you just, again, blow us all away with what you've done and what you've achieved right now with the accelerator and with so many other things in your life. And I think, for me, I've made tons of mistakes in my life. And each time I make a mistake, I feel like I'm opening my heart to another opportunity and shaping something different. And for the book, it's an interesting one. And it started really from a mistake in my life, because I think I was such a fierce I was so focused on goals. I was in the telecommunications industry in corporate America, then working in different countries. And I was so focused on that end goal that I really lost who I was. And I remember waking up one day and thinking that I felt more and more alone. And then I had the wonderful chance to work on incubating the elders some 17 years ago now. Wow. And I started to watch them, and these are my heroes. And I started to think about, how did they become who they are in the world? And what became really clear very quickly is that they became who they are because of the people they surrounded themselves with, whether that was each other, whether that was their friends. And, I think as human beings, we often mistakenly think that we make ourselves, when in reality, it's the people we surround ourselves with who make us who we are in this world. It's the people who can challenge us and pull us out when we're on those skinny limbs and say, hey, that wasn't so great, and be honest with us. It's the people that lift us up when we need that belief. And those are the people who shape us into who we are. And I feel strongly in the world that we focus so much on individualism and how we can be the superhero, how we can get the gold star, how we can be the best in school, in our companies. And we focus very little time on those partnerships and collaborations that make us who we are. And so that was really the genesis of the book, was sitting at the feet of the elders and watching them. And then the more I got into it, and we started studying also large-scale collaborations and building collectives, I started to realize that at the center of most great human achievements were these large-scale collaborations. And you have to learn how to partner to begin with in order to collaborate.
Yeah. And in the book, you interviewed Nelson Mandela and Graça Machel, Archbishop Tutu and Leah Tutu, Richard Branson and Peter Gabriel, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, Ben and Jerry's from Ben and Jerry's. And it's just, hearing all of these stories and seeing all of these things come together, and how all of these partnerships were able to make a difference, and then deciding, what, this is something that everybody should know. This is like secret sauce that we can all tap into, which is, the partnerships and the deep connections that support us. And it even talks about things like marriage and how to be better in your marriage and how to be a better partner. And I absolutely felt through reading this book that I'm able to show up as a better partner, because I understand the value of the two of us together versus, well, this is what I want. And, and it's a journey. It's an always journey. But I just thought, how did that change you? How did that, having these conversations and realizing it is about the deep connections and all of these the connectivity that we have with the people who challenge us and don't always agree with us. And even the point where you were talking about, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter, when they nearly broke up. I mean, like, unbelievable, and they were like leaving notes for each other because they were writing a book. Tell us a little bit more about that. That was one of the, two of my favorite stories are Jimmy Carter stories.
Yeah, and it's super interesting because I think we often put these people on pedestals like President Mrs. Carter or Mandela Grassa, Archbishop Tutu and Leah. And, we put successful people on pedestals and we think that it's their experience, it's their skill set. And what was very clear is that their superpower was their ability to partner. And so that was a massive eye-opener for me. And I think when I started to do the interviews, at first I was going to just do romantic partners. So I started with President Mrs. Carter was one of my first one, which made me very, very nervous. And then Leah and Arch. And then I interviewed Ben and Jerry, and that changed my perspective completely. And their interview was all about love, the love they had for each other, the love they had for what they were doing. And so then I opened it up to interview all types of partnerships, friends, family, romantic, business partnerships. And what was super cool, Raquel, is that I started to see these patterns emerge almost after the first 10 interviews. And then they were consistent of these 6 degrees of connection. And that President Mrs. Carter, they were one of the first interviews, but they also helped set the scene for some of these patterns. And, one of the patterns was hard work. Every single one of these partnerships, no matter who they were, talked about how it was hard work and how you have to put the effort in to make sure that you can end up with the thing that will be the most important thing you do in your life is the relationships you shape. And so President Mrs. Carter, the story you're talking about was, and they were just incredible how honest they were in their interview. And they were writing this book together, which I actually have on my bookshelf, which was around when he came out of the White House. They were writing a book about the rest of their lives together. And so, but they ended up getting in this incredible argument because they couldn't agree on historic facts. And so at the time, it was long before the internet, they had a computer that they put at their kitchen table. And President Carter would go in and type a note to Rosalind, then he'd leave. Then Rosalind would come type a note to him on the screen. And this lasted for weeks. And they talked about how the solution was they got their editor in, and their editor came up with a third way, basically, which was in the book. And if you buy it still today, you can see a J next to Jimmy's version of the historic facts and an R next to Rosalind's. And that's how they solved it and went on to have this extraordinary relationship in their life. And, Bert and John Jacobs, the co-founders of Life is Good, call it, who I just adore too. They call it, you can't see the label from inside the jar. So sometimes we need to get external help, and that's okay. And it's good to do that, to salvage something that could be so important for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And it's so funny. You brought up Bert and John Jacob, and you brought up Ben and Jerry. And I remember, there's a big part of the book that talks about having fun. And even, especially with Richard and Peter Gabriel, about having fun in your partnering. One of the funny things I remember was that with Ben and Jerry, one is sort of really brash and open, and the other one sort of explains, well, what he meant was very gently. And I just thought that was so adorable. And then with Bert, I had the honor to meet him, and he's so fun. So tell us about fun, what the importance of fun, because I think sometimes we take having fun for granted, and the importance of fun at work, the importance of fun in partnership, the importance of just fun in our lives and enjoying it, especially with people who work as hard as you do.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Raquel, I mean, this whole experience, all these interviews and writing this book completely changed my life in so many ways. I don't think I'd be with my wonderful partner, Chris, if I hadn't gone through this journey. And then in the workplace, I've had the great fortune of partnering with Richard now for some 22 years. And he taught me a lot about fun and play, because I came from the corporate world, full blue suit, high white button shirt, stockings, blue pumps, it was just serious all the time. And so when I came into Virgin and Virgin Unite, when we were doing these gatherings in the early days, I was like, okay, we have to have content from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. We have to maximize everyone's time. And he just ripped up all my agendas. He ripped up all the content, and he said, no, he said, we're going to do content in the morning from 8 until noon. then we're going to allow people to play together in the afternoon and then come back together for dinner. And that was one of the wisest decisions that we made in relation to these gatherings, because it allows people to get to know one another in a whole different way and to build a much, much deeper connection when they are playing together and being together. And, you know, I think a lot of the work we both do is very serious. And I think you have to have lightness and play in order to build those connections with people and in order to keep people going and excited to come back. And that's one thing we found, particularly during COVID, is some of the collections we've built, like the Africa Donor Collective, is adding play at different points, allowed people to want to come back every Friday and get on those calls. And I think you can do that whether you're in person or whether you're virtual. And one of my favorite quotes is something that Archbishop Tutu said to a dear friend, Shannon Sedgwick Davis, where he said, joy is a discipline. And part of that discipline is bringing that joy into other people's lives and knowing that's part of the work that we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. So I think the other part of the book that I thought was really sort of mind-blowing was the celebration of friction. You know, because normally you think, this means it's not working. And you know, it goes back to what you were talking about, finding a third way and not being able to see the label from inside the jar. But you know, how do you celebrate friction? I mean, friction means that it's broken, something's wrong, no?
Yeah, so I don't think friction means something's broken. Friction means something's different. Yeah. And so it was very interesting, because when I first started writing this book, I had so many people say to me, you have to get the fights, you have to get the drama, you have to get the plate throwing. And I really digged in the beginning to try to find some of that. And I think every relationship has problems. There's none of them that I interviewed that didn't come into problems. I think what was fascinating about these partnerships is they built tools to learn to turn that friction into a positive learning experience and to come out the other side a better person, rather than to allow it to break into drama. And I think media has done us all a great disservice, because we focus so much on the drama that people think, oh, that's the norm. And what I learned through these partnerships is that drama doesn't have to be the norm. You can take this friction and, like, you know, many of them, there's like 12 tips that they all had kind of in common. And like one that I love so much is positive amnesia. And, you know, that they had gone through really hard times together. And some of them I know over the last 20 years and know that there's been issues. But what was fascinating is they didn't betray each other, and they let go of what's happened in the past. So like Ben and Jerry, I've had the amazing opportunity to work with now for probably close to 18 years. And I've never once seen them betray their love for each other, whether it's through a moment of negative body language or a word or a comment. They hold that space of respect. But all of the partnerships came up with tools where they gave each other a chance to actually communicate with one another and talk through their problems. Like Joe Confino and Paz Perlman had this beautiful thing called Friday Talk, where every single Friday they went into a safe space outside their house, and each one of them had a chance for 15 minutes to talk about what was good that week and what wasn't so good that week. And it allowed them to kind of diffuse the anger during the week. They knew they had this time, and it allowed nothing to kind of build up and roll into something more significant that it needed to be. And all of them had, like in companies, you know, putting in place structures around roles and responsibilities, around clarity, helps make any friction that comes in, again, an ability to talk about it rather than be debilitated by it.
Yeah. And then last but not least, gratitude. I just thought, you know, and I have learned so much about gratitude on this journey, just, you know, whether it was absolutely grateful for meeting you and grateful for all of the opportunities that has opened up for me. But, you know, there's a certain just grace in dealing with the Virgin family, and I really have found it to operate like a family. And so tell us about gratitude and how important that is as a part of living into your true self and becoming the best version of yourself.
Yeah, and this concept of shared generosity, is important. And it has to go both ways, because I think that's the other thing we saw when we studied partnerships that broke, is that it can't be an imbalance. It's important that that set of values is held with all parties in the partnership. And it's very connected, I think, to humility. And on the generosity side, I think it starts with all of us realizing that we're crazy if we think we can do things alone, particularly right now and how complicated the world is. And the only way we're going to solve our problems, the only way we're going to get everyone in the world to have a chance to thrive is if we radically collaborate. And a big part of that is a generosity of understanding that other people have skills that we don't, and acknowledging that, and so that they feel valued. And also there's a shared generosity. And like, I love some of the interviews that have, for example, and they've embedded it in the structure of their companies, like Golden Palm Investments, the three brothers that started that, they focused on how did they create this shared prosperity for everyone in the company, right down to the employee that was cleaning their windows, and realize that it's everyone that's part of that. And they had some really cool things on shared generosity, but also on shared, they called their mom the CEO of them. There were three brothers, Sangu, they're the Delhi brothers. And they said that their mom, if their mom found something that one of them did wrong, she'd actually punish all three of them together as collective punishment. And then from a shared generosity, she'd do the same thing and celebrate them. And every night she'd ask them to look in the mirror and ask themselves the question, what did I do for someone else today? And, Bert and John did the same thing, their mom, where they would sit at the dinner table and she would say, share with me something that happened that was great today, that was positive. And that sense of generosity was embedded in them from the very start, which led to life is good and that sense of optimism. So I think what we saw throughout all the interviews is that people had that sense of humility and generosity for their partners and for the collective. And even small things like in the group, the community that was protecting the ozone layer.
Oh my gosh.
Was amazing. He did generosity better than anyone I've ever seen. He would make sure he recognized people. He would make sure that they were acknowledged, that they were given an award. He joked that he was more in the awards business than he was in helping, get companies together to come up with new solutions. And that was part of his role. And that's what holds communities together, that sense of purpose and shared generosity.
Yeah, and it just all that he would have gone through. I think, in the birth and John story, it's amazing to understand the humility of their beginnings. How humble their beginnings were, and how having this generosity and being able to recognize what you're grateful for and what went well, and focusing on those things and building upon that. You would never imagine, based on where they are today, that would be where they came from. As well with the ozone, with solving the ozone layer, just how much sort of blood, sweat, and tears they had to go through, and just the onslaught of attacks over time. And I think that's one of the things that really struck me about this partnering, is that you're not always going to be able to be at your best. You're not always going to feel like it. And in that partnership, with those, with the ability to create those magical moments. And I love that part as well. But, you need somebody who's going to have your back, that when they're not on their game, you can have their back as well. And that's how you just create something that's sustainable and lifelong and ultimately gets us to the best place possible.
Yeah, it's like this extraordinary perpetual tailwind. And some of it is, you're right, like that's the beauty of partnering and collaboration, is that when one of you is down or not at your game, the other one can help lift you back up again. And those magnetic moments were something beautiful that I hadn't expected when I started interviewing folks about how they put rituals and traditions and daily practices in place that help them stay connected. And a lot of those were about gratitude. Like one that my husband and I stole from one of the partnerships is this idea of, we both travel a lot. So every day we used to send, and we're naughty now because we're not doing it because we're not traveling as much, but send each other 5 points of gratitude of what happened in that day. And it was this amazing thing where, sometimes the first 3 are easy to come by and you can say, okay, this is what happened that was good. And those last 2 are often hard, and it builds this connective tissue where you learn more about each other as individuals and what's important to you too, and what you're thankful for every day.
Yeah, and it allows you just to focus on the things that go right. Yeah, and because so often we focus on the things that go wrong, and it's so easy to kind of spiral downward if you're doing that. But just to focus on the things that you have the ability to influence, while still not accepting the unacceptable.
Yeah, and that's the key. I think we can't, as human beings right now, the biggest enemy is comfort. Yeah. We can't fall into a place of comfort because there's so many unacceptable things that are happening around us right now. So, Casey Gerald, the author who I adore, I asked him how he kept on going all the time. And he said to me, be the fire. Just be the fire. He said, keep that fire in your belly constantly and make sure you never lose sight of that, and bring that fire to others. And I think we all, as human beings in this crazy world that we live in right now, we have a responsibility to be that fire and never fall into this sense of it's too big, it's too much, because it just takes, like the ozone community proved this. It took 2 incredible scientists to come together, and then they sparked a beautiful community all over the world. And so any of us can make a massive difference, whether it's in our family, our community, in the world, doesn't matter. I think the most important thing is that we're all doing something right now.
Absolutely. Jean, thank you so much. I'm blown away by having this chat with you. I'm ready to read the book again. I feel like just, remembering some of the stories, I laughed, I cried. And there is a thing that Jean does that I said to her, I'm going to try and hold it together. But the first time I was in a room when she said it, and it's about love, and it's about, what are you going to love into being, or who loved you into being? And it just reminds us that it's never just us, someone loved you into being, and you are going to have to love something else into being, whether it's yourself, whether it's a project, whether it's something you're passionate about. But we aren't here to be fighting with each other. We're here for love. We're here for service. We're here to do something important, and we all know it. And now we just need to forge the partnerships that will help us deliver.
Yeah, and I think that's the greatest thing in life. There's nothing better than coming together and figuring something out and coming up with solutions and going forward and loving each other into being. As you said, that's a beautiful, who has loved you into being is a beautiful quote that I stole from Mr. Rogers, who I adore. And it is that question we all need to ask ourselves: who and what are we going to love into being? How are we going to be the best version of ourselves to use every minute we can in our lifetime right now to love others into being?
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for joining us for this incredible episode of Getting to the Top, where we figure out how to become the best possible versions of ourselves and how we lead with passion and enthusiasm towards creating a better and more inclusive and just world. Thank you so much, Jean, and please subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you on next week's episode. Bye.
Thanks, Raquel.